This will be the read along for Chapter 1, Lesson 2 in Social Studies called Cities and Empires. We were talking about how people migrated from Eurasia into North America and South America and how they settled in and they created cities and empires. Page 8 in your history book if you have it. If not, you can follow along. I provided you guys with the PowerPoint for the Chapter 2. Great civilizations of Mexico, Central America, and South America. The guided question says, what civilizations in Mexico, Central America, and South America predated the arrival of the Europeans? Centuries before the Europeans arrived, great civilizations or highly developed societies thrived in Mexico, Central America, and South America. The largest and most advanced of these were the Olmec, Maya, Aztec, and Inca. Each of these civilizations controlled areas covering hundreds of square miles. They included millions of people that lasted for several centuries. The accomplishments of the Olmec, Maya, Aztec, and Inca rivaled any of the great civilizations in other parts of the world. Their people built grand cities in dense forests and on high mountains. They created spectacular works of art and developed advanced tools. They also came up with a complex method for tracking time, counting, and writing. I'm pretty sure that is on the quiz towards the end. We're going to break them up into the different civilizations. The Olmec along the Gulf Coast of what is now Mexico, which is at the bottom. A people called the Olmec once flourished between 1200 BC and 800 BC. The Olmec built stone houses, monuments, and drainage systems. Their farmers grew food for thousands of people. For reasons that are not fully understood, the Olmec civilization declined. About 300 BC, it had collapsed, yet the Olmec had a strong influence on the culture that followed. The Maya civilization followed the Olmec and reached its peak about 200 AD and AD 900. Maya farmers planted maize, which we learned was corn, beans, squash, and other vegetables. These crops helped feed large populations, which may have peaked at 2 million people. These people lived in one of the many large cities in the Maya built in the steamy rainforests of present-day Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and Belize. Maya civilization was a theocracy, a society ruled by religious leaders. Powerful Maya priests believed that gods were visible in the stars, sun, and moon. Their understanding of astronomy and their advanced mathematics helped them predict eclipses and develop a 365-day calendar. Thanks, Maya. The Maya also developed a system of writing called hieroglyphics. So we now have a calendar because of them, and we also know how to write. We learned how to write from this civilization. Maya transport and trade. The Maya were active traders. Farmers brought maize and vegetables to city markets. They exchanged their goods for items such as cotton cloth, pottery, deer meat, and salt. Without wheeled vehicles or horses, the Maya carried goods on their back. Traders traveled on a network of roads that were carved out of the jungle. They also used canoes to ship goods such as jade statues, turquoise jewelry, cocoa beans used for making chocolate up and down Mexico's coast. East Coast. Maya civilization declines. In time, the Maya civilization declined. About 1200, its once great cities were nearly deserted. The reason is a mystery again. One theory holds that the soil became exhausted and unable to produce enough food for large populations. Though their civilization declined, the Mayan people did not disappear entirely. Descendants of this great civilization still live in parts of Mexico and Central America today. So they get to hang on to all of that culture. Page 10, the Aztec Empire. In 1325, centuries after the fall of Maya, a group of hunters called the Aztec were wandering through the central Mexico. They were searching for a permanent home for their people. One day they came upon an island in Lake Texcoco. There they saw what they thought was a sign from their god, an eagle with a snake in its beak sitting on a cactus. According to the Aztec legend, this sign indicates that the island was to be their home. It was on this site that the Aztec would build their capital city, Tenochtitlan. Today, it is the site of Mexico City. At its height, Tenochtitlan was the largest city in the Americas and one of the largest in the world. The city was a center of trade, attracting thousands of merchants to its outdoor marketplaces. Tenochtitlan's construction was a marvel of building skill, knowledge, and human labor. Workers toiled day and night under the directions of priests and nobles. They dug soil from the bottom of the lake to make causeways or bridges of earth. These causeways linked the islands to the shore. Elsewhere, they used earth to fill in parts of the lake, creating fields of growing crops. So they really changed the topography of the land. We learned that in science this week. They changed a lot of the topography so that they could take care of their farming and cultivate their land where they lived and make it useful for them. Aztec culture. The Aztec created a military empire in the 1400s. The Aztec army conquered many neighboring communities. Conquered people had to pay tribute in food and other goods. Some were also forced to work as slaves in the Aztec cities and villages. Like Mayan culture, Aztec culture revolved around its religious belief. The Aztec believed they must perform human sacrifices, to please the gods and ensure abundant harvests. They sacrificed prisoners of war by the thousands for this purpose. We know today that that is not a right way to live. A great city remembered. The Aztec Empire was still going strong when Europeans arrived in America in 1492. The first Europeans to see Tenochtitlan were awed by its splendor. In 1519, Hernan Cortez led 550 soldiers into the Aztec capital. Cortez wrote, it was right here. This is from the source on the bottom. There are 40 towers at the least, all of stout construction and very lofty. The workmanship, both in wood and stone, could not be bettered anywhere. So they had very superb architecture. Bernal Diaz del Castillo, one of the soldiers, marveled at the great towers and queues, which are the temples, and buildings rising from the water. Some of the Spanish soldiers thought Tenochtitlan was more magnificent than Rome and the other great European capitals of the time. And then we can stop for a second and we can check out the map. So this is Mexico. This is Tenochtitlan right here. What's the yellow? Was the Olmec lived here. The Maya lived here. And some of the Aztec lived here also. The great Inca civilization. Why were they considered a highly developed culture? In the western highlands of South America, the largest of all early American civilizations grew, the Inca. The Inca people founded their capital city of Cusco around 1200. In 1438, the Emperor Pachacuti came to the throne. Pachacuti. He and his son, Topa Inca, expanded the empire by conquering all the others with their powerful army. At its peak, the Inca Empire stretched for more than 3,000 miles from present-day Colombia to northern Argentina and Chile. The double-headed serpent is Aztec's wood carving covered in turquoise tiles. So those are all little mosaic tiles. They have been worn as a chest decoration during the important occasions. Very fancy. We have 2 more little pages to read. Fearsome warriors. The Inca state was built around war. All men between 25 and 50 years old could be drafted to serve in the army for up to 5 years. Their weapons included clubs, spears, spiked copper balls on ropes. Using slings, Inca soldiers could throw stones 30 yards. Rather than fight this fearsome force, many neighboring areas accepted Inca rule. The Inca allowed those who cooperated to take part in the empire's government. Those who resisted or rebelled faced harsh treatment. Inca culture. People believed their emperor was a descendant of the sun god. The Inca made magnificent gold jewelry and temple ornaments as gifts to the sun god. Inca workers also built great cities devoted to religious ceremonies, including Machu Picchu, a site hidden high in the Andes Mountains. We did learn about that, I think, where did we learn about that? In the last chapter, or it was something we read in class? Supporting the large Inca population required a lot of food. In order to farm their mountainous land, the Inca cut terraces or broad platforms into steep slopes. Stone walls on the terraces held the soil and plants in place. Inca farmers, they grew maize, squash, tomatoes, peanuts, chili peppers, cotton, and potatoes. Managing and ruling over such a large territory was a great challenge. The Inca built at least 10,000 miles of stone-paved roads to link distant parts of their empire. The roads crisscrossed mountains, deserts, and dense forests. To cross deep canyons or river valleys, the Inca built rope bridges. Runners, called messengers, to and from the empire in Cusco to outposts of the empire. The Inca language, Quechuan, became the official language for the entire empire. The Inca had no written language, but they did develop a system of record keeping using string called quipus. By knotting different colors of string in special patterns, quipus helped the Inca record and keep track of information about resources, such as grain supply. Like the Aztec, the Inca were thriving in early civil 1500s. They too would come face to face with Spanish soldiers and experience a dramatic change in fortunes. So we'll read about that in the next lesson. These were the quipus to keep track of resources such as food supply. The different colors and lengths of string and different types of knots made up the system for recording important information. That looks like a nice decoration to me, but to them it was a whole bunch of numbers and recorded information. Thanks, guys, for following along. Sorry, this was a long chapter. We will use the shorter version tomorrow, and then we will have our quiz on Wednesday. Thanks, everybody.